I worked for the Dallas Mavericks, an NBA team owned by Marc Cuban. It was a gambler working in the NBA to help the team make better, smarter basketball decisions. Me coming in there, it was almost like there was like an immune response. Like this foreign body has come in to this ecosystem. And a lot of people had like an actual physical immune response with me because it's just like, okay, if this is the way we're going, I can't compete in this environment. Like we'd be in an offensive meeting, for instance, and they're like this thing like, oh, the ball finds energy, like all these like euphemisms. So like I just went and printed out like a plot that showed like your offensive efficiency, which is that's what you're solving for. Offensive efficiency, how many points you score every time you have the ball.
Right.
I studied the game for 20 years, gambling at the highest level. I've had tons of bad ideas, but when you gamble, all your bad ideas are gone or you go broke.
Hello, Win-Winners. Today is one for all you math and sports geeks because I am speaking alongside Igor to the legendary sports bettor Haralabos Voulgaris. Now, Haralabos, or as we know him, Bob, is one of the most successful gamblers of all time, in part to his astonishingly rigorous and hyper-rational approach to analysis. An approach that led him to absolutely dominate the world of basketball betting and even got him hired by Marc Cuban to run the strategy for the Dallas Mavericks. So expect to hear plenty of juicy stories, as well as, of course, his secrets for success. We also hear about his latest, rather ambitious undertaking to buy a third division football team, that's soccer for all you Americans, a team called CD Castellon, to see if he can use his strategies to bring them to the first division. So on that note, let's dig in. Were there any particularly formative games when you were growing up that shaped your personality?
Ooh, my personality. I would say, I don't know about games, but I grew up at the racetrack, the horse racetrack. So I would go to the racetrack with my dad. I quickly learned because my dad is kind of was an emotionally based human being and not a very successful gambler. So I think that was like a formative thing for me. Like we would come up with a plan when I was older, like maybe let's say I was 14, 15 now. And I would like study the racing form the night before. And this is what we're going to bet in this race. And then he would get to the front of the line and someone else would be betting something different. And that guy maybe looked smarter than his 14-year-old kid. I don't know. So he would listen to that guy's, but he would change his mind and bet with that other person. He was very emotional in that regard. Also, he would like base like stuff on dreams and colors and yeah, Greek guy. I mean, he was like, he had the worry beads and he would sit there and he would, if he saw like a certain vivid color in his dream, he would bet the silks of that color in the racetrack. So I think that, me seeing that and seeing how unsuccessful that was, I think formed my life experience for gambling, being perfectly honest. I think it made me realize like that's not, I don't know what the right way to go is, but that's not the right way to go.
Right. Do you have any superstitions?
No, I don't have any superstitions.
Did you have like a Santa is not real moment with watching your dad gamble where you were like, oh, probably everything he's doing is right. And then
I had a different moment where I was like, and this is like, I love my dad, don't take this the wrong way, but there was like a moment where I realized like, this is a man who cannot be trusted. So, which is not a thing you want as a child growing up. You don't want, like, especially your father who you're spending all your time with. So there was just like my experience growing up is like, you got to fend for yourself and you got to make it yourself because no matter what this person's saying, it's probably not going to come true for you. And I think some of my other family members, I think, bought into his spiel about how he would care for them, he would do this, he would buy this for them, he'd set them up doing that. I knew like, yeah, this guy is not, it's not happening.
Is that because he had what you would call a gambling problem? Or?
Yeah, he definitely had a gambling problem for sure. He lost a lot of money gambling. And I think also it was like a pretty volatile household growing up. So I think that was part of it, like super, like it wasn't, yeah, I think for me, like I'm I don't want to say unemotional because I do get emotional, but I like to have like proper emotions, not emotions that are out of control for no apparent reason. And so like I can feel things, but I want to understand like why I'm feeling more. I think some people are overly volatile. So I think that was like the formative. It wasn't like, oh, well, I learned how to play gin rummy as a kid. Maybe that was the answer you're looking for. But I think that's what made me, I think, the person I was.
No, I mean, it's interesting that you consider like horse racing a game. Like I think a lot of people, it just wouldn't even enter into there. Because I actually went to arguably, it was probably the first form of gambling I ever saw or did as well. There were these like little country bumpkin horse races near where I grew up called Point to Points. And it would just be, I mean, I have no idea if these horses are even any good, but they would just gallop around over these huge fences. And I think that was the first bet I ever made as well. I could not have been older than 13 or 14. And these bookies didn't really care. I mean, I got like a couple of quid from my mom, and I would be like, again, I picked from like the color, or like that horse looks kind of cool.
Yeah. It also was interesting because like as kids, like you would get money on a Sunday to gamble. We'd all go like for the Sunday brunch at the racetrack, at like the nice restaurant at the racetrack. And you'd get money to gamble. And like my two sisters, they were just like, cool, pocket the money, don't spend it, don't gamble. I would always gamble. Me and my brother would gamble.
So talk us through how you got into sports betting from there. Because again, the sort of first thing that pops into my head is like, oh, it's interesting that you chose, having had a sort of negative experience from your family life with betting, gambling, whatever you want to call it, to then choose that as a way to make a living.
I think I was like maybe 19 years old. I was tree planting for the summer when I graduated high school in between going to university. And I tree planted the second year, I guess it's like the gap year or whatever. So you're planting like, 500, 1,000, whatever, like a lot of like you're basically planting trees from 7 a.m. until whenever you get tired, 3, 4 p.m. with a lunch break. Yeah, it's hard work. Like you go to bed and you're dreaming of planting trees. Like literally you're sleeping in a tent and all you think about is planting trees. Because that's all, like when you go skiing, sometimes that happens.
Yeah. From poker, I get it.
Yeah. But anyways, I had an injury. I fell, like I finished planting all my trees and then you have to run back to get more or walk back, which most people, but I would run back because I was like trying to make money. I fell and put my hand down and got like a, tree went right through like a stump went right through my hand. So I couldn't, so I got workers' compensation, which was nice because then I didn't have the camp cost. And I proceeded to go to the racetrack and I ran like 6K up to like 45K betting simulcast from like the different racetracks around, like not just the Winnipeg racetrack, but like the other racetracks.
And simulcast means that you're watching other locations.
Yeah, you're in Winnipeg, but you're betting on Woodbine or Belmont or Saratoga.
Right.
So it's like an all-day event. You can get there at like 8 in the morning, like 9 in the morning, 10 in the morning on a Sunday and just go all day. And yeah, I just lost it all. Like I think I had enough money to pay for lost it all. And so ended up not going to university that year with the plan that I wanted to. And then ended up going to Vegas with my dad later on in December of that same year and kind of got more into like basketball betting versus horse racing.
So then how did you realize that you had a strategic edge at it?
I didn't really have a strategic edge in basketball then or for a number of years, but I had an edge in Canadian football, which is like the NFL. So it's not like soccer, but it's the NFL, but in Canada. So it's like Canadian Football League. They expanded to the US market. And there was American teams that had a bunch of competitive advantages. Like the Canadian teams had to have a certain amount of Canadian players starting on their team. The Americans didn't. Canadians had like very specific stadiums. The Americans, they had to like rework the stadium field size to work because the Canadian football field is longer than an American football field. And the end zone is longer also, and it's wider. But some of the American stadiums were not. Mm-hmm. So there was all kinds of like little hacks you could do. Like one of the stadiums, instead of having a 20-yard end zone, it was like shaped like an octagon because they couldn't make it the full 20. So like games were just lower scoring in that stadium. You could, even before the data came in, you could watch and realize it's going to be more difficult to throw touchdown passes in that stadium because it's like 15.5-yard end zone or whatever on the corners. There was one stadium, I think Baltimore, I think the rumor was that a yard wasn't actually a yard in that stadium. It was like maybe 9/10 of a yard because they would just paint the field wasn't long enough. I don't know. I'm not sure if that's true or not.
So they just botched it.
I think so. Yeah, it was just weird. There's a lot of idiosyncrasies. And I watched a lot of Canadian football, and I had an edge, and I was good at it. Talent I do think I have is I can watch a sporting event and understand what's happening very quickly, even new sports, and kind of see things that other, like having good pattern recognition of like how coaches might adjust, what they could do, what's happening. So I did Canadian football. I became pretty successful at Canadian football. And then I started betting NBA basketball, I think a couple years into when I was in university.
What was it about
successfully?
Basketball specifically? Did you just enjoy the game or did you play it when you were growing up?
I don't know. I just liked the rhythm of it. What I ended up betting on in basketball is I started betting over-unders, which is how many points both teams will score combined over or under a certain number. And then I started discovering like you could bet halftime over-unders, like first half and second half. I think that was like when I started to realize, oh, I have an edge in this because some teams just had like very specific styles of play where they would play certain players in the first half, but not in the second half, a different strategy in the first half versus the second half. And so that's where I think I started to have a real edge. When the halftime totals first came out, they would roughly divide the first half total, the full game total in half and give you the first half and the second half. Maybe they'd make the first half a little bit higher scoring because on average, the first half was higher scoring than the second half.
But I thought the second half is the one where you get more fouls and that tends to lead to more points.
Sure, but you also have the situation where teams are protecting leads and they're more fatigued.
Playing more conservative.
Right. But there's just like this little edge that I think I've never really talked about it before. And there's people that are still making money off of it. It's kind of interesting. Like a lot of poker players actually, that former poker players know about it. We're just, yeah, I don't, people can, like a lot of people think, oh, he's full of shit. He never made money, blah, blah, blah. But like this edge is like the greatest edge ever. When I first had my halftime NBA totals angle, I was living in Montreal. I had met the biggest illegal bookmaker in Canadian. He paid the largest fine in Canadian criminal history. He was like this Italian mafia guy. And these guys determined that beating him a lot of money on Canadian football and NBA basketball. And then one day there's like a knock on my door and these guys are like, hey, we want to come talk to you. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to talk to you. I don't know who you are, but I don't want to talk to you. And he's like, no, we need you to meet. I need you to meet someone. My boss wants to talk to you. Like, don't worry, it's all fine. I'm just like, it's like, we're also around the time that I think maybe The Sopranos was out. I'm pretty sure it was. I was like, this is not a good thing. I don't know much about this world, but this doesn't seem good. To make a long story short, I met the guy who was a delightful human being. And he said, I'll make all your bets for you. You tell me the plays. I'll handle all the paying and collecting in Canada. And I will, I'll take care of everything. We're partners now. And I was like, do I have a choice? He's like, not really. Ha ha ha. And I was like, but I was cool that I was okay. It was kind of fun. And so I would meet, the funniest thing about, and so when I would bet with this guy, my point is I would regularly be like all in, like, you know, like we would be betting, if my bankroll was like $1 million, I'd be like $11 million in action that like by Wednesday, because you settle up at the end of the week. My edge was so big that I couldn't lose on, like, there's no way I could lose on these halftime totals I was betting. And so I just took like really big swings.
But surely, like, what's the variance here? Like, there must be some.
No, it was like, I'll tell you what the variance was. There was, we were betting first half unders, second half overs. Those were the best bets. First half unders, second half overs. Okay. So the second half has overtime and fouling in your favor. So like the variance, like, oh, it goes to overtime. That sucks if you have an under. Well, you have an over, so it doesn't matter. So the game's going to be higher scoring. So some teams did what they were supposed to do, 41 games a year on the road, and they would probably have gone somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 overs, 10 unders, and like maybe one push in the second half. Like it was such a massive edge. Like you have no idea how big this edge was. Like you could not lose. And you weren't just winning your games by 2 points. Like you'd have over, like the game total would be 180. The first half total would be like 91.5. Second half total would be like 89.5. They'd score like 82, 83, 81 in the first half and like 110 and 107 regularly in the second half. Like you're winning all your bets by 10 plus points, which is a lot, repeatedly. Like when I say you have to get so unlucky, like it was remarkable. And it's largely gone now because the bookmakers will adjust the total based on this, but maybe they don't even know why. They just, I don't know, one day people can look back at this podcast when I explain it. But it's, anyways, there's a certain thing that certain teams can do, and some people maybe in the chat can talk about it, but there's certain things some teams can do in order that the coaches will do to change which half will tend to be higher scoring than the other. And I'll just leave it at that. And so I spotted that very quickly.
So everyone had to find the edges themselves, and you found them via watching it yourself, maybe with your brother as well, right?
No, yeah, my brother wasn't involved. I was just living in his basement, but yeah.
Like when we started playing poker, like usually how people did it there was you had kind of like a group that you studied with together or so.
I'm a loner. I'm a loner. I'm just like a lone wolf. I don't know what to say. Like lone wolves tend to die, but I just has always been someone who was like, my parents, I was the youngest. My siblings all worked in the restaurant that my parents owned, like typical Greek, stereotypical Greek life. And I wasn't old enough to work in the restaurant. So I was like literally at home alone, like 7 years old, watching Dukes of Hazzard and I forget the other show on Friday night. So no, there was no me with the team figuring out with my brother. It was just me watching as a, 20-year-old trying to figure stuff out. And I figured out some other stuff too, like I think that I can talk about, like there's like this thing where teams that played on the Pacific time zone, and then had to travel to the mountain time zone and play a game the next day. So versus Denver or Utah, which is why Denver has like a famous home court advantage. A, because of the altitude. B, because of
They have to travel east.
They have to travel. Yeah, they're traveling and they're losing an hour.
Yep.
And it's a back-to-back. It's one of the few times that happens. That was a big edge.
That's crazy that makes just even an hour time zone.
It's worth like
change
4
screws
points.
people. Wow.
Yeah, that hour of time. Now everyone's got like these Whoop bands. They know how valuable sleep is. But back then, I think it was more of a...
I mean, jet lag. I mean, we've just flown out here to Europe, and I mean, it took us like 3-4 days to become.
Yeah, but
humans.
you guys, could we talk about how amateur you guys are at your jet lag situation here?
How dare? What do you?
No,
what do you
guys
mean?
are the biggest amateurs I've ever seen in my
Well,
life.
okay, what did we do wrong?
Everything.
Go on.
Okay, you got here. First of all, the first thing you should have done is no matter what, you should have been restricting your eating before you traveled the night before, which I don't think you guys did. I'm guessing.
That's a no-go. Yeah.
Okay, so you restrict your eating. You take your first meal at breakfast time of the place you're arriving. Okay, and then you just have to be in the sun. Like you can't be in your room.
Sure.
You force yourself. Like
you
we're
need
here on
the UV on your retinas. Blah blah blah.
Yes. So staying in a dark cabin with the blackout blinds closed till 5 or 6 p.m.
Well, we were asleep.
I get it, but you should have set an alarm for early morning. You should have forced yourself to get out, jump in the ocean, and you'd have been good. I haven't had jet lag in like 10 years, so I'm like maybe not 10 years, but in a while.
Okay, so I'd love to understand a little bit more about the cat and mouse game that you have to play, or you did play with the bookies, in terms of, you find out, you find an edge, and then presumably they discover that you've found that edge, and then you have to find a new one and so on. How did that work?
I think part of it is I think like if you have an edge, so like the edge I had, the halftime total edge, there's another group that discovered it. And I did a very good job of like not blasting the numbers first thing in the morning, not like just trying to like really.
What do you mean by blasting the numbers?
You like, okay, so Pinnacle would open up early in the morning and you could make a bet. Like Pinnacle's one sports book at the time. So Pinnacle and BetChris were the sports books. If you're going to bet a lot of money early, you don't want to bet it with like the sharpest books in the world. Like in other words, don't be betting your big edge with Pinnacle or with BetChris, the guys who are making the lines, because they're smart enough to understand, okay, something's up here. These guys are winning money. They're doing something. What are they doing? And so you don't want the ones who are able to make the lines know something is up, because they'll catch on.
They're the ones who are basically setting the entire market.
Correct.
For everyone. Right.
So you don't want to be betting those places. And I've had crazy situations in terms of like, it's a different type of cat and mouse, but like where we had probably one of the biggest, like they're called outlaw accounts, but like one of the biggest outlaw, like like some local bookmaker who's taking massive amounts of action from some massive whale. Igor can give the definition of a whale, but it's like a VIP losing gambler. And this guy would take up to like $500,000 on like a halftime total, but he would only let you bet 30 minutes before the game started. And he would only take bets like that from people he thought to be like massive fish. Mm-hmm. And so I happened to have like 2 great fish accounts into this guy. One of them was Tom Dwan, which I'm sure everyone knows because I've talked about it enough. So I had Dwan bearding into this guy. Then I had another guy who's a friend of mine who I won't name also. So I was like managing both into this like largest bookmaker in the world, who had no idea what was coming, what he had. Like he just had no idea. Like, he didn't think Dur was particularly sharp. Nobody who has done any type of gambling arrangement with Dur would think he's particularly sharp.
Well, actually, let's explain what beard means.
Beard is someone who places bets on behalf of someone else. So you find a VIP, a degenerate, famous person, all the above sometimes. So he just was like, yeah, I'll let Dur bet whatever he wants. Why not? Durwan was like, we got to keep the account going. I'm going to bet $500,000 on the Pro Bowl. I'm just like, dude, the guy's got a max amount of money he can lose. He's going to lose it, and then we're done. If you want to prolong that game longer to win the same amount of money, that's on you. I'm going to find this other guy, and I'm going to do business with him. You can just you can decide. And so, but with him, yeah, you would fake the market heavily. So you would be betting a lot of money early in the day just to get the exact same number you would get 30 minutes before post. And so that was another cat and mouse type thing that we were doing.
And at this time, what does it take for you to develop your own understanding of the lines, etc.? Like, what's your?
We had a model that is simulating the outcome of the games. Like, I want to say Monte Carlo sims. It's not. It's like an actual full-fledged simulator. It's simulating every possession of every game 10,000 times and iterating it on and on.
When you say building simulations, like what kind of methods were you using?
We were doing mostly like Bayesian stuff, but like mostly like black box like using like C to like just to write the code to like actually simulate the outcome of a basketball game. And then we were doing like different types of regression analysis to determine the priors and the weights for every single thing that was happening. So like one of the most basic things is like something called plus minus in the NBA, like adjusted plus minus, which means like if you play all your minutes with LeBron and never play with anyone else, an unsophisticated model might have trouble differentiating who's good between, like every time LeBron came out, you came out. Every time LeBron came in, you came in. And you're just using plus minus data. In other words, how many points for or against you gave up in your stint. The model might have trouble identifying who's better, who's responsible, you or LeBron. That's if you're using like a raw plus minus model. But you can do other things that look at like who's the guy who made the pass, who's the guy who took the shot, who's the guy who scored the basket, who's the guy who got the rebound. You add in all those different things. But also like what we did is we would look at like for pace in terms of for doing like totals, we would look at things like, okay, how did the possession that you were involved in start? Did it start off of a made basket or did it start off of a missed basket? Because possessions that start off of missed baskets have a higher EV than off of a made basket. Possessions that start after a free throw have an even lower EV because the defense can set. So just doing like a lot of little tiny minuscule edges of thinking about how the game of basketball is being played.
Basically, you benefit a lot from not having the box scores, but actually like many people looking at
the play-by-play data.
Really the play-by-play.
Yeah, the play-by-play data is published. You have it, so you can look at it. You can see who entered, who took the shot, who made the pass. And now the data is so rich that there's cameras in the ceilings of the stadium that take a picture of the court 60 times or 24 times a second, I think. So you get like full tracking of like who made how fast were they running? How was he open? Was he over here? Was a pick set? It's quite insane how good you can get in terms of you have enough data at predicting things.
That seems like gold dust, right? That
it is and it isn't. It's like each game is like 2 gigs of data. Like you need like some really fucking sophisticated people. Like there's so much, there's signal and there's noise. That's all noise. And so like the difference between the play-by-play data and the camera tracking data, it's just a lot more data. And then the samples get smaller and the regression gets more tricky. And all the different branches you can go to, like you can go off in the wrong signal, the wrong branch, and think you're on the right branch, and now you've already like you're 5 steps removed, and before you realize like you're looking at something that's not significant at all. It's just noise.
I've bet occasionally on sports as well with friends, etc. It's fun. There are like certain narratives that exist of like how people maybe just fool themselves into not making that bad of a bet. It's like, oh, bet against the public. Is something like that true?
There's a couple things there. One is people definitely are fooled into thinking they're good at something that they're not, which is what I like about gambling because it should strip you of all your delusions. Right. I experienced that in the NBA where I would talk to people that would be building models to evaluate players, and they'd have this, we have like a great model. I'm like, okay, how are you testing it? Like, what are you using to evaluate your model? Like, oh, well, what do you mean? How am I supposed to be testing it? Well, if you can't predict the outcome of basketball games with your model, then how do you know that your model is actually good? That's how I always felt. But the other part in terms of like the public, some of the best opportunities, one-time opportunities ever have been in the playoffs of the NBA, for sure. Like the 2014 San Antonio Spurs. There's a couple. There was 2014 San Antonio Spurs versus the Miami Heat was probably the best betting opportunity I had seen in a long time. I mean, it wasn't the best, but it was like a great opportunity where I was telling everyone, I was telling the Chinese guys from Macau, like, this is like the nuts here. Like you can, whatever. Miami's barely a favorite, and they're so much better. Or excuse me, San Antonio is barely the favorite, and they're so much better than Miami. Like not close, because Miami had LeBron, they had Dwayne Wade, they had the big 3. They won the previous year, but it was a 5-game series, and San Antonio just crushed them. But yeah, there's been some instances like that where the public has valued a team in a widely disproportionate method, but it doesn't happen as much, I think. The other part is I could just be fooled, right? That's a one-off event. And I could just think I had this big edge and they won, but maybe I didn't. I'd like to think I'm right. And I watched the game. It looked like they dominated them, but maybe I just got,
Did you bet on the Mayweather McGregor?
No, I'm not someone who bets on everything. So I didn't, but I know a lot of people that had.
Yeah, that was our largest bet that we've ever done. Yeah. Because it seemed like just pure outrageous notion that McGregor could beat Mayweather whatsoever. And then the fight was
stressful.
Floyd Mayweather was actually a beard of mine for I think it was like 2 days.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah. So I sat next to him at a Miami Heat playoff game. he was like interested in the girl I was with, who's just a friend of mine. And she became like great friends with him. And somehow it ended up where I think actually Viffer. I think Viffer actually made the connection later. He's like, oh, I met that guy. Yeah, I want to bet his stuff. And so for a day, Floyd was betting my NBA basketball at, I think it was, what was the name of that one? The one that was run by Cantor Fitzgerald, I think Cantor Gaming. I don't know what it was called, but I was in Vegas. But they were taking his bets, but it was me for a day. And the next day I was like, hey, I want to bet, let's say I don't remember, but I want to bet Denver. He's like, no, I like the other side. I like New York. And I'm like, well, okay, but it doesn't work that way. I want to bet Denver. And he's like, well, I want to bet New York. And I was like, okay, well, why don't we just bet against each other then? And he's like, I don't want to do that. You always win. I was like, okay, what? I was like, what? What? And I was just done. I couldn't take it anymore. And I was just done with Floyd Mayweather. I was like, yeah, you guys can try to figure it out, but I'm done. My main thing was never doing anything wrong by anyone. Like my word was always, so that was like a big thing for me. Like as much as I was an asshole or direct or whatever, like I would never screw anyone in a business deal or whatever, or not pay someone on time or go back on my word or what I was going to do. And I felt like by doing that, it allowed me to have good relationships with people, and it allowed me to be in situations where I was given like an opportunity like to work with someone like that.
I just want to dig into that a little bit more, because would you say that your word was your bond, and you wanted to act in high integrity? Would you say was that always just purely the case because it had instrumental value, or did you actually see it as like something that you valued in and of itself, as a kind of like an innate goal that mattered, or has that evolved over time for you? I
think for me, because like I mentioned earlier, like knowing that you can't necessarily trust the word of people and how hurtful that can be, like the word of like whatever, like your caregivers or whatever, how hurtful that can be. I just was like resolved myself to like he was my anti-hero in some ways. Yeah. So like be very different, like make sure that I follow through on things I was going to do, make sure I was follow through on things. I've always been that way. So I think that was part of it. I don't think it was like, oh, this is going to get me ahead in business. I just think it's just something that it didn't occur to me that, I mean, obviously you can deceive people in different ways. Like there's business things where you can be like cagey, or in poker, you can bluff, you can do whatever. But in terms of like, if I tell you, and like, okay, and for sports betting, you would have several agents working for you, and you would sometimes give them the wrong side. You just have to. But that's
or you use a beard. Like that's it. Like, because there's certain degrees of deception that you were like clearly very, very comfortable with.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But why was that deception okay in your sort of moral calculus?
It's a game. It's like almost like, why is it okay to bluff in poker? Mm-hmm. It's like sports betting is a zero-sum game. The bookies are doing whatever they can in their favor to win. And like we had, even the guy that we had, like the big outlaw bookmaker, we had a Square account, so we would primarily bet overs with that account, because of the way the year was that year in the NBA, overs were more plus EV. It was post-strike year, so overs were more plus EV because it was the lines makers were using the strike or the lockout year's data, which was lower scoring. So they had a year's worth of data, which was lower scoring. The next year is not strikes. The players are in shape. They're starting on a regular schedule. So why are you using this old data? So my point is betting overs was profitable. So we had an account with this guy to bet overs. We would primarily bet overs with him, but he would, juice the lines up and make the over. Like he knew we were betting overs and we wanted to bet over. So like that's not a deceit. Like the line's 180, like 200.5 everywhere, and he's giving us 201.5 because he thinks we're going to bet over. That's not devious. It's just like clever. And so sometimes we would, fake the market, or like you said, give people the wrong, fake the market, give people the wrong side, etc.
So it sounds like, just inferring what you've said, it sounds like your thinking was, if it's a zero-sum game, it's a degree of like deception is acceptable provided it's within the rules of that game.
Yeah, and I think also, how is your reputation with, like, what is your counterparty reputation? So like with the guy I was betting with in Canada, his name was Dario. With him, we had a close relationship, so I would never go back on my word with him. We were like effectively partners. But I might have someone else who is giving me accounts to bet, but he's giving me 10 accounts, but he's keeping 10 for himself just to see what I bet on the 10 accounts, and then he's betting them, So for a guy like that, or maybe he's giving me 3 accounts and he's got 15 and he wants to see what I'm betting, and then he's going to bet the 15, but he's telling me these are the accounts I have. A guy like that, I'll try to screw over, because he's basically trying to take my information and not loop me in on the profit. And then the problem that's happened now with sports betting is like you have so many like poker players and former DFS guys who are all like sports betting wizards now. And there is no...
He did air quotes.
and there's no honor among them. And they look at it everything very binary. And so like someone could be like, okay, I could bet $3,000. Like let's say the three of us all want to bet the same game and the total market is 10,000. So we could each maybe get like, maybe you'd get 5 and Igor would get 2.5 and I'd get 2.5. Someone else would be like, okay, and the total market would be 10. Someone else would be like, well, maybe I could guarantee myself, and maybe some days I wouldn't even get the full 2,500. So, but I can bet early and guarantee I'm the only one that gets it. And it just takes one person to defect, as you said, to start doing that. And now like Pinnacle opens their market at $500 on the overnight the night before, and sharp guys who have very good models are betting the overnight market for $500. Because their bankroll isn't that big. They're that's 500 might be enough for them to get down. Whereas back then there was nobody who was sharp betting $500 that would move the market. Now $500 can literally move the market. So that's why sports betting is just dust now.
I'd love to just sort of go into more like the dark side of gambling, betting. Not so much for yourself, but like, I'm sure you've seen, deep addiction. Like, did you ever have moments where you yourself felt like, had to ask yourself, am I addicted to this?
Yeah, I think like when I came back from tree planting and I was losing money at the racetrack, I had a problem. Like I had no edge. I didn't know what I was doing. That's when I kind of resolved myself. Like I need an edge. Like I can't just be like, trying to win because I'm special. Like it doesn't work that way. I thought I had an edge, but it was clear I didn't. And I did did a little more idea, had a better idea of how deep the takeout was. Like in other words, the hold percentage that was, $100 was bet at the racetrack. 30% would just be going to the racetrack. 70% is distributed amongst the bettors. You got to be really fucking good to overcome that. Now, some people have, but they're not. That wasn't me. Later on in life, I started to I've had so many stressful situations. Like when I was betting, a large portion of my net worth times 5 or 6 on credit, or like through investments, where I definitely take personal pride, like in thinking clearly in stressful situations. And so part of me is like, when there isn't enough stress, I feel like my life isn't that exciting. So that's maybe the addiction, is like, oh, I'm missing that part of me that makes me feel special, where everyone else is freaking out or would be freaking out and I'm not.
There's this really lovely analogy someone once gave, which is like, I'm like one of those fish that lives at the bottom of the ocean, where like when there's tons of pressure on me and it's, there's so much water pressure, it's fine. But if you bring me up to the surface and take that pressure away, I explode and die.
Yeah. I don't explode and die. I just feel like a lack of purpose. I just feel like, okay, now what? Like it's almost like life is a little bit muted when there isn't that. Like it's not like that now, because now I can enjoy vacations. But certainly in my late 20s, early 30s, if I didn't feel the constant pressure, I felt like life was just boring, or stress, or like, if you grow up and I think it's like, I've done like a lot of like work, whatever, with people in like terms of like therapy, et cetera, just knowing that when you don't know if someone's going to come in the room and start yelling and screaming at any moment, when you live with that as a young person, that feels familiar to you. And so you find ways to put yourself in that situation where chance or randomness it feels comfortable to you, where something is out of your control.
I can empathize with that a lot. Also, having had a lot of yelling in the childhood.
Yeah.
And nowadays, I just feel also very comfortable with...
Me yelling at you?
Well, actually, yes. But the gamble, or like risking more, is something that I'm seeking rather than avoiding.
Comfort. Yeah.
And feeling that the pressure that it kind of gives is actually kind of like, oh, cool, great. Now the situation matters is what it means. It's like, otherwise it kind of doesn't matter. Whereas like, if now you're risking more, like, okay, now it matters. It means like, this is, I don't know, just achieving something.
I still get like very, like when people yell and scream, like this also happened with the Mavericks. Like when someone yells and screams or like breaks something, like I hadn't experienced that in a long time. But like in the NBA, it's just right. Or like literally like coach like picked up a trash can, threw it across the room, broke something. And I thought, A, this is fucking silly. But B, something in me like was almost like awoke. Like I felt very, very like uncomfortable.
Can you explain who the Mavericks are and what your involvement was with them?
Yeah, I worked for the Dallas Mavericks, an NBA team owned by Marc Cuban. My direct title was head of quantitative research and development, which Marc let me make up. So I was like, sounds good to me.
It sounds fancy.
I should have went with director of basketball strategy or something like that. It would have been a little bit more understandable, but I was like, quantitative research and development sounds interesting. What was my role? It depends on who you asked. Some people thought I was like the spook who was there to like spy on behalf of the owner.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, some people thought that I was like running everything as like the GM of the team who's literally running everything. I think the truth was probably, I definitely wasn't a spook. I had a very early situation where I was in the coaches' meetings all the time with the head coaches. I had a very good working relationship with the head coach of the team and several of the assistants. Not such a good relationship with some of the assistants, or one of the assistants. Wasn't bad, but it was just like I could tell like he's schemy. But anyways, what was it? It was like, you know, it's hard to describe. It was a gambler working in the NBA to help the team make better, smarter basketball decisions, and that involved everything from like what type of offensive philosophy should we be pursuing, what players should we be drafting, what players should we be trading for, should we be putting like, it was a lot. Like I had a couple conversations with Coach Carlisle, who's like an NBA championship head coach. This is in 2000, not when I was official team employee, and we got along fine. Like he liked me. He wants to win, and he would take anyone's opinion who he thought would, like, not anyone's, but like he would weigh the opinions of the staff equally in terms of who could help them win. And I think very early on, this might sound whatever arrogant, but I think very early on he recognized my opinion was giving him more of an ability to win games. And so he would use my opinion a lot more than maybe some of the people who are actually the assistant coaches. And so, you know, this is, we redid our entire offense philosophy based on like suggestions I made. And he can disagree with it if he wants, but I got the receipts. It's fine. You know, like, but like we went to a 5-out offense because of me and the stuff that me and my team came up with. And, you know, he basically told me like, I'm not fucking doing that. Get the fuck out of here. And 3 weeks later they went to like, he would do that a lot. Like he would basically tell you to shut the fuck up. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And then implement the idea as though it organically sprouted from his own brain. But I think also because he wanted to understand it and I don't know, the offensive thing was interesting because I don't think anyone really thought running a 5-out offense, which is just like a specific offensive alignment. And it's not like I came up with it, by the way. Like I just saw another NBA team doing it, and I was like, yeah, that's the way we should be playing.
What was the state, their quantitative analysis before you came along?
Zero. Like I don't like you know, everyone thinks Marc was like this like super cutting edge owner who has like always like big on analytics, whatever. There's a couple guys working in the analytics office. One guy worked really, really hard, still works there. He's a good dude, works really hard, smart. I don't know how much people pay attention to him. I don't know how much they don't pay attention to him. I just know that in my mind, it was like nobody was, you know, I got there and I, you know, immediately started hiring people in my department, started doing stuff.
Were they just playing intuitively?
Yeah. Well, I mean, but they were, you know, they had skilled NBA coaches that were very good at what they were doing. So it wasn't like they needed the analytics to help them get better, but they would, you know, every team wants to pretend they're doing analysis without maybe actually doing it. Or maybe they have someone on staff, but they don't listen to them. And that's kind of the place where the Mavericks were, where they had people who they weren't listening to. And when I got there, I was like able to show them why. There's just like a lot of different scenarios. Like we'd be in an offensive meeting, for instance, and they're like this thing like, oh, the ball finds energy, like all these like euphemisms. Like we got to make at least 3 to 4 passes before we take a shot, like 4 passes to take a shot. So like I just went and printed out like a plot that showed like your offensive efficiency, which is that's what you're solving for. Offensive efficiency, how many points you score every time you have the ball.
Right.
Okay. Offensive efficiency declines with the number of passes you make, because every pass is another opportunity for a turnover, which is bad.
So it sounds like there was like almost like a lot of like old wives' tales, essentially.
There was a lot of old wives' tales, and there was a lot of like I'm a guy where like it became the coaches' meetings became very quiet, and even one of the assistants even said like, yeah, I don't want to say anything because I know if I say something wrong, Bob's gonna like have data like tell me to fuck off, basically. So
must have ruffled a lot of feathers.
A little bit, yeah. But I was like an easygoing guy. Like I was just like having a good time, you know. I wasn't like life or death.
Well, people don't like to hear their intuitions being challenged.
Definitely
and if they've
not.
got these deeply held intuitions that they've had a long time, and it's interesting because I bet some of them were born out of some truth. And
some of them were good, by the way. Some of these guys had intuitions that were very good, but that doesn't mean every one of them was going to be good. And you should want to be able to.
Right, your job is to come and razor blade the crappy
correct.
Ones.
And I think the people I vibe with are the people who can accept the fact that they might be wrong and hear about it. And here's why.
here's my plot.
Here's why you're wrong. Yeah, there's like some actual data that shows like we would have coaches meetings sometimes. And then by the way, after like a short period of time, like I was no longer in the coaches meeting, just to be clear, because it was just counterintuitive. Because unless you were like, what do you think we should do here? And then you go around the room, not just because of me, but every person is going to impact the next person's choice. So like, unless you're writing like a sealed envelope of what who we think should guard this person, it doesn't work. But we used to go in there some mornings and there would be like, we'd look at shots and there'd be like a wide, this is like when the 3-point shot wasn't quite as like, I was pushing for more threes. In fact, they broke a franchise record in 3-point attempts. I think the second game or the third game of my like time as like an employee versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. But they would like see a guy with a wide open three, but like 3 seconds into the shot clock, they'd go around and they'd freeze frame it. And they'd like go around the room like, is that a good shot or a bad shot? Wide open shot, 3 points from a great shooter. And they'd be like, it just breaks the spirit of the team. If that doesn't go in, like guys are going to feel like they create all these stories for why they think things are happening. And I'd just be like, they get to me and I'd be like, what the actual fuck are you guys talking about? Like that's a wide open 3-point shot from a guy who shoots probably 43% from there. So it's like, you're not getting any better than that. Like you're out of your fucking mind. Like basically like, let's move on. And now everyone wants to take early transition threes because we had data that showed like the earlier you want to take early shots in the shot clock because you have a clock. You have to shoot within 24 seconds. So imagine knowing that you have to take a shot within 24 seconds and someone thinking that an early good shot is bad. Like, do you know you're going to get a better shot than that later? And as the time keeps on ticking, it's like when you're playing chess with a timer. So I don't know. It is a lot of old wives' tale stuff. It's a lot of like people who never really the analytics weren't really a part of the game. Now it is, and people think it's kind of ruined the game. Maybe it has.
Do you think there's ever like a sort of tipping point of too much analysis?
Yeah, for sure. And it's a culture war too. It's jocks versus nerds.
Yeah.
And like me coming in there, it was almost like there was like an immune response. Like this foreign body has come in to this ecosystem. And a lot of people had like an actual physical immune response with me because it's just like, okay, if this is the way we're going, I can't compete in this environment. I don't have a place on this team if I can't.
I'm not a statistician.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't know any of this stuff.
Speaking a foreign language, essentially.
Yeah, like one dude was working there, didn't even know how to use Excel, and I was like, "How do you send emails? Like, who sends your emails for you?" Like as a joke, I was like, "Bro, you got to learn how to use Excel. Like, I can show you how to do it. It's easy. Like, drop down. It's like it wasn't for any analysis. It was just like for a simple task that we had because he was counting everything by hand. And I was like, "Yo, like I can show you." He's like, "No, I just don't get that stuff. I'm not comfortable with that stuff." Super hardworking guy, super great guy, but wasn't comfortable with technology.
Why did you leave?
To be honest, I was like, when I was there, I'm a type of person who I signed a 3-year contract, and about 6 weeks in, I was like heavily questioning what the fuck did I just do here? I had just had a broken engagement, flew back from Greece direct to Dallas to meet with Marc, agreed to a job contract that morning, and then was like, oh, I'm moving to Dallas now. Every year, like around December, I'd be like, yo, I can't live in Dallas anymore. Like, I want to go to Mexico. I want to work from Mexico. I'd rather like split my time between Mexico and LA or whatever, Mexico and Europe and whatever, mostly Mexico. You can fire me. You can let me out of my contract, or I can work from Mexico, but I'm cool with whatever you decide. And they would be like, okay, no problem. You can work from Mexico. And there was like one point where it was very difficult because me and the coach actually got into an argument, we always argued because that was just his style. He was a very combative person and he was very good at it. And he was also very like a master manipulator, not in a bad way, but like just like mental mind games was his thing. And so there was like one situation where we had our starting center got injured. We had to like revamp the way we were doing things. I was like working remote, so I wasn't there. And he calls me up and he's like, did you hear what we're doing? And I was like, yeah, you guys are going with, so-and-so starting. Yeah, I wouldn't do that, but it's fine. I was like, well, what would you do? And so I said, like, this is what I would do. Like, we should go small. We should embrace the small thing. We'll play Dodo at the 4. We're playing Portland that night. They already met with the team and told the team, this is what we're going to do after this injury. We're going to lean into this style of play. We're going to go big, lean into it. And so they presented it to the team. I think this is what happened. I don't know. This is like maybe too much of the spilling the tea, but whatever, who cares? And then he talked to me and I was like, yeah, it's a bad idea. I think you should do this. Like, we're going to win games 130 to 120, but we're going to win games. Nobody's going to be able to stop us. We'll be able to go full 5 out. That's what I would do. Personally, I think you're making a mistake. And I didn't realize like okay, cool. Like, we'll change it. I didn't realize it would be, if he agreed with me, and I could tell the part is I could tell he was agreeing with me, but he was still hesitant to do it. And I didn't figure out why until I spoke to one of the assistants. He's like, well, yeah, because we just met with the team and explained to them what we're going to do. Now this guy's got to figure out a way. And the players are smart. Like, they're going to think immediately, oh, it's Bob. Like, Bob saw something different, and that's why we're doing something different. And so, yeah, sure enough, he started yelling and screaming at me, like, what the fuck? This is why we can't have you working remote. Like, you got to get, like, what does your contract say? I was like, my contract says that I have to answer to you and Mark, and that I'm working. Where does it say you have to work? I said, it says I have to work in Dallas. Like, okay, case closed. I was like, yeah, no problem. So were you coming to Dallas? No, I'm not coming to Dallas. I do not want to live in. I didn't like it.
Were there other teams at the time that had their not token nerd, but just like another nerd come in?
Now I think there's more, but not in the role that I had. It was such an odd situation where, like, there was no other team that would ever hire me. Like, because it was such a fucked up situation, I had to appreciate the fact that it had to have been fucked up in order for me to be there. Because if it wasn't fucked up, like, you had to have a guy like Mark to want to do something as crazy and out of the box as that. Like, have a dude who was a former gambler, you know, around all the time, coming up with ideas and, like, you know, in coaches meetings, you know, providing reports. And, like, you know, I had to CC Mark on every email. And so, you know, Mark would chime in with some ideas too in playoff series. Like, it was just a different environment. Like, you know, Mark gets up in the middle of the huddles during playoff games and talks to the, you know, he's on the court. Like, that doesn't happen. That just doesn't happen.
So that surprises me, because you clearly added value to the team.
100%.
Right? So why are other teams not emulating that?
I mean, I don't know. I think that maybe I was better. I don't know. Like, I studied the game for 20 years, gambling at the highest level. I've had tons of bad ideas, but when you gamble, all your bad ideas are gone, or you go broke.
Right.
So there's a survivorship of ideas. Things that are predictive are left behind. It strips you of all delusion. Like, there's a lot of delusional gamblers. Like, everyone hears the story. Oh yeah, I have a friend who never loses at blackjack. Like there's always that. But, like, if you have like a 20-year career where you're winning money and you're doing it in an analytical way, using like very, very strict, like, you know, not just record keeping, but like model building, you have good ideas.
Do you start sort of introducing probabilistic thinking into the organization? Like,
sure. We added something called XPPS, which is expected points per shot. And the coach always like, what was the XPPS last night? It couldn't have been bad. It couldn't have been good. I was like, no, it wasn't that bad.
Like quantified metrics that they didn't
like
have
before. In other words, you're removing the luck of the shot going in. Like, what was the quality of the shot? Were we supposed to win the game via shot luck? Or shot luck is not a great proxy for that, because basketball, there's a lot more nuance than that, but it's decent. It's not like football where it's like XG is the big thing, expected goals. But, you know, in football, soccer, we call it football now that I'm a football guy. XG is like the gold standard in some ways. And I don't think XPPS, expected points per shot, is quite the gold standard in the NBA.
So you left the Mavericks a few years ago, and then last year you bought a football team, soccer team.
I did. Americans. Almost a year. We're doing this on the 19th. I believe it's a year to the day, actually.
Wow.
Yeah,
July 19th, 2022.
I think on the 20th, we bought the team on the 20th.
And they are...
When I say we, I mean me and Oscar, by the way. I don't know why I keep on using we. But
like, Oscar, for those who don't know.
I do have partners
Oscar,
now, but at the time, it was just me.
Oscar is Bob's dog and love of his life.
He's not the love of my life.
Are you sure? Seems like he is.
No, he's been described in the Spanish newspapers using Google Translate as my most faithful squire. And I'm going with that.
Either way, there's a very symbiotic.
It's a great bond.
Yeah, there's a lot of love there. Yeah. So, yeah, you bought CD Castellon. Is that how you say it?
Sure.
Spanish team, currently in the third division.
Currently in the third division. Historic team was not always in the third division. Was last in La Liga in '91. Mm-hmm. They were in the second division like 4 years ago. I don't know how that happened. 3 years ago, 3 or 4.
So it seems to an outsider like me like an absolutely crazy undertaking. Why, and what's your goal with it?
The goal is to get the team to La Liga. That's the goal.
And La Liga is
the top league.
Like the equivalent of the Premier League in the UK?
Yeah, it's like you're playing at Barcelona, Real Madrid, those teams.
One of the big boys.
Yeah, and it's not that unrealistic. Like, it really isn't. Like, I think, okay, going into it, we had soccer models, football. We had models already for the sport. We thought they were decent. We got some help from some other people who have like some very good models that we believed in, and we kind of have been working to try to improve our models. And so we're doing a real data, like the one thing I didn't like about the Mavericks was it was like half in data, but not really. And I wasn't able to set the culture. I wasn't able to really like define who I wanted to work with and why. Like I want to work with people who have high integrity, who work hard, who can handle criticism, who can give me criticism without worrying about offending me, who are just like honorable, good, hardworking, smart people. Like that's kind of been my recipe for success, is finding people that are smarter than me in certain areas and leaning on them and partnering with them. And so I wanted to do that, but with like a real analytic bent for football. Like I really wanted to lean into the data because I think there's an edge there. I really do. Like Spain is a wonderful country. There's like great culture, there's great history. But like one of the jokes I had like is like we lost a playoff game to a coach wearing skinny jeans, and I'm just like, I can't handle this anymore. Like, if we can't beat the guy coaching against us in skinny jeans, like,
what's wrong with skinny jeans?
It's just like, I don't know. There's nothing wrong with skinny jeans, but it was just like, it was just endemic to like what the reality is of third division football.
Okay.
Like we played a game where the sprinklers turned on in the middle of the in the middle of the game, and then we got beat by a coach wearing skinny jeans, and so it's like my point is not this is a culture that loves football. It's very passionate. It's very emotional. They have a deep history. They play a style of football which is not the same as they're playing in England in the Premier League, which is not to say that it's backwards, but it's certainly not cutting edge. And I feel like there's a lot of room to play maybe their style is better. Let's just say that. Let's say maybe the style of Spain is better. But like if every team in Spain is playing a similar possession-based or like, let's say a cautious style of football, and you come in there and you're the only team playing a really aggressive play on the front foot style of football, you have a competitive advantage. That's my belief. Mm-hmm. And so that was part of it. I really wanted to define the cultural workplace. And also I fell in love with the city and the people. They really love the football team. And I didn't really get that when I first bought the team.
How much did you pay?
We paid, I think, like somewhere in the neighborhood of like, okay, the $4.5 million immediately, plus assuming another like more like much larger amount in debt, plus guaranteeing like payments that hadn't been made, past payments for payroll, social security, money that's owed to the government, there's also, we didn't have a training facility. So like when people say how much a team costs, it's like, okay, it's not how much a team costs, how much does it cost to get the team up to a level it needed to compete? Right. And so we have a 6-year plan to get to La Liga, and we're spending as if we're already in like second division. So we're burning quite a bit of money in the third division.
And what's your sort of expected revenue stream? How do you monetize a team?
You get them to the second division. You don't lose as much money. Second division, you break even or make a little bit of money or lose a little bit of money in the second division. Absent player trading, you can make money through player trading. So I think in the second division we'll be profitable for sure. So the way I looked at it was we're buying a team in the third division at about, let's call it, let's say maybe like 8% of the price of a second division team. Do I think I have a better chance of getting a team than 8% to getting up the second division? Yes, I do. And in fact, we came within one goal of getting promoted in the first year of owning the team.
Like what roles do you have at the team? It sounds like a lot of different roles. You're doing transfers. You have a bit of GM role as well.
This is funny because like when I bought the team, like all the people who were like dismissive of me were like, he's going to fire like 4 coaches in his first year. And I was just like, get out of here. Like these people are, I'm not that awful a people person where I'm just going to fire all the coaches, but I'm on my third coach. But to be fair, I inherited one coach. He was already hired like a week before I bought the team. He was not the guy. Like, just to be clear, not the guy. I couldn't vibe with him. His personality type was like a top personality I was not going to vibe with, could not handle criticism, was not facts-based, was very into his feelings, and in my opinion, operated in a manner of integrity that did not fit the way I wanted to run my football team. And the coach really does represent your football team. It's not the owner and his doodle, it's the coach. So the second coach was an amazing human being, like really good person, high integrity, worked very hard, very smart, but maybe just didn't have the experience necessary to get the job done. So we let him go. We were going to let him go whether we won or lost our promotion game. Third coach, we hired someone from the Dutch league And he is like, I think this is the guy. Like we have like so much in common in terms of the way we see the game, the way we see like being aggressive and taking chances. Like my thing is, we played in our playoff game as though like we were hoping to get lucky and win the game. And like, that's not my lifestyle. Like I've never been the type of person which is like I'm not going to be taking any chances and just hope I get lucky. Like, oh, I'll just play it safe and then maybe I'll ladder up. And then, so this style of football that I think we're going to play is going to be much different and much better. So to answer your question, what is my role? My role was to find a coach who played a style that I jived with and just let him do his thing. I think I found that. We did that through analysis. We determined which styles of play we thought were the most effective to impact winning, what coaches approximate that style of play most, whether through their own analysis or just by blind luck. Like just Durr got really, really good at poker, probably just got a blind luck. The style just kind of worked. He just randomly lucked into a style that was very, very successful for the time. But I think this guy looks at the game very analytically. He's very, very smart, and he's got a good track record. He's promoted his team to the first division in Holland.
In that final game of the last season, where you're one goal off from making it into the next division, surely if there was anything that gave you this, emotional, you had the feelings on the line then.
I actually, it's funny because I don't normally like fist pump or clap. And I'm pretty sure I did when we scored to go up 1-0. I'm pretty sure like I gave someone a high five. And then after the game,
gave someone a high five.
I was excited.
You came to regret that fist bump already.
I did. Yeah, it didn't serve me. No. And then after the game, I was like, okay, we didn't play good enough to win. We weren't ready. Let's get back to work.
Did you have any moment? Have you ever kicked a trash can or like cried into the mirror? I don't know.
Cried into the mirror is a little like, definitely not into the mirror. I've definitely cried before. That's happened. Not into the mirror. That would have to be.
I don't know why. That's not a thing I do either. Before people think that's what I've never done that. I'm probably
no, of course, yeah. But like, my thing is like, sports isn't it. Like, I've had like emotions with girlfriends or people I love and care, and not where I've yelled or screamed because I just don't do that. But where I've been sad and I've cried and I've like tried to like plead my case, it hasn't worked, whatever. I've definitely done that. But sports, like, this ain't life and death. It's a fucking sporting event, Like, I want to win very, very badly, but I don't know. Like, I did. I got excited when we scored, and then when we lost, I was very, very quick. Not even when we lost, by the way. Like, as soon as the way we went to a completely defensive game plan, I was resigned. I was like, yeah, this is probably, we're not going to protect the lead for 70 minutes. It's just not happening. And so, but after the game, I did almost cry. And I probably could have cried if I was just like a little bit more like sad. But it was because, you know what it was? It was everyone around me was crying. Like the players were like in tears. The dude who runs our social media and graphics, the nicest kid ever, like lives his name's Ivan. He was inconsolable. And I saw that and I was just like, I gave him a hug and I was just like, okay, I feel so I was sad. Yeah, it was like really hard. Like there's a picture of me like with one of my players and the player's just like crying and I'm just like consoling him. It's just, but to me, I was just like, it's okay. Like we're going to get back. Like we're going to, on the bus ride back, I was just like, remember how this feels like. I'm proud of you. And like next year we're going to win. I don't know what to say. Like work hard, use it as fuel.
So yeah, this makes me feel, because I was never that into sports. I loved it playing. I love playing sports. I was always a very competitive person. But as I've gotten older, I've never quite gotten the sports bug. Like I've never had a team that I love and I root for and so on. But so I want to understand, like, what is it about certain sports that what is it? Why does society love it so much?
This town, this team is so important to this town. Like, we had more people watching the game on a TV in our stadium on TV versus the other team had live, because our fan base is so big, and we had like 3,000 or 4,000 people like see the bus off, like, or see the bus in before the game, just come early. Like it is a religion. They love the sport. They're so passionate. They can be entitled at sometimes, which that's okay. But they're definitely like, it's something that's actually really, to me, it's actually quite beautiful how much they love this team, and that you can be someone who brings joy, assuming you succeed. Now, the flip side of that is when you don't succeed, they're going to be coming for you. And I'm not sure I'm ready for that. Not if I'm losing €5 million, I can promise you. I'm going to be like, if I'm losing €5 million to get yelled at by some fans, that's like, okay, you can run this team if you want. But for now, it's been very beautiful. Like, everywhere I go, people are very positive. You can see they love the team. We've already sold more season tickets for next year, more commitments than any other team in our league by like almost 2, I think.
Well, what is this like hole in people's hearts that you think it's filling? You know,
I don't know.
Is it like
it's a working class city, and I think it's the connection between like fathers and sons and daughters, and they play in some of the kids play in the foundation and they play in like the youth team, and it's I don't know, because I'm only been in it for a year and I haven't even spent that much time there. I've been spending a lot of time recently, but I didn't in the beginning because I didn't really like the people that were working there at the time. But now that I brought in my own people, I enjoy the environment more. It's hard to describe unless you can kind of see it. Like you go to the stadium and they're singing and chanting. They're crying after the game. The fans are crying. It's a lot. But I don't know either. Like for me, I wouldn't like it, I own the team or I run the team, whatever. Like I'm the custodian of the team. Like, so I have but I don't get it because I've never been that passionate about some other sport.
I think you touched upon it though. It gives people community. Like I grew up
real community
in Dortmund, where at the time it was a population of 580,000 people. Well, we had a stadium that fit 82,000, out of which, let's say, like, I don't know what the actual number is, but probably like 40 to 60,000 people come out of Dortmund.
Yeah.
So it's about up to 10% of the whole town congregating every 2 weeks in the stadium together, and like half of the rest probably watching the game as well. It's just like this, we're all doing something together. It's kind of the same reason why public holidays or like all of these things are like unifying and great. It's like you're just, I don't want to say it's a replacement for religion, but in a way it is. Like people do have like similar rituals and all sorts around it as well.
Yeah, there's just it bonds the community together. It gives them something that they can, and I think also like it's a working class town. And I think like maybe, especially like post-COVID or during COVID, I think there's like, it was already like this before, but like this team's been through a lot. Like like, this is what people told me, like, okay, we lost this promotion game and now we feel okay because we know you have a plan. And you're not just, because before it was life and death, because for a lot of these teams, like they can't afford the next year of losses if they don't get promoted.
Oh, wow. So then the town wouldn't have had a team at all.
Yeah, or the team goes bankrupt or it gets relegated because they can't afford to make payroll. And so now they go down to the 4th division or they have to sell more players and now the team's guaranteed to get relegated the next year. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's just a shared familial, cultural, it's a beautiful thing. Like watching, even like driving to the stadium on the day of the last playoff game we had, and seeing like all the people wearing like their jerseys, like their kits, and like little kids with like the black and white. And I go around, people are asking me for my selfie and photo. It's just, for me, it's foreign to me. I don't like it in the sense, I don't like the fact that I am recognizable to that level, but I like the fact that people have appreciated what we're bringing to the team, if that makes sense.
This whole podcast is about competition.
Yeah.
Right. And sport is arguably the healthiest manifestation of competition in civilization. It's like, again, it's like bringing people together.
That or mating.
That or what?
Mating.
Mating?
I'm just kidding. Definitely. Clearly, you've never been.
I mean, there's been a lot of jilted lovers who've done bad things.
Not healthy. Yeah, it's not healthy at all.
It can be. It can be. It can make people strive, to.
No, you've never been like on a trip with like where 3 dudes like the same girl. It's like not a fun thing at all.
Right. How do we, from what you've seen of competition throughout your career, when do you think competition is most likely to be healthy, and how do we manifest more forms of that in society?
I think like separating yourself from the outcome in a manner it's understanding that it's competitive, but it's not personal, and separating yourself from like a life and death, like that. My thing is like avoiding the life and death manifestation of some of these outcomes. I think once you've separated yourself from the fact that it's going to be okay if you lose, you can have healthy competition and do your best. And it can be, but like, think about it, if it's life and death, now you're starting to talk about people cheating, people doing whatever it takes to win. I think, I don't know. I think sport's beautiful in that regard because most people can appreciate the beauty of the fact that you start at a young age in a given sport. And so it's like, it also becomes part of your identity as you move up into your life. And I think like the innocence of when you start playing a sport when you're younger, I think people keep that purity with them as they go up, which I think is quite evident in athletics. Everyone who's made the top of their field in athletics, or made like even like a 3rd division player, they're not the top player in the world, but these guys are still very, very good. Like it's a great form of soccer, and they all started at a young age for the most part. And I think they've kept that purity of the game with them along the way. And I think that's why, in some ways, professional sports can still be quite beautiful, even though the stakes are so high.
How do the players react to having, a foreigner run the team who's got this very analytical approach to the game, their beautiful game?
Yeah, and who traipses around with his doodle everywhere. He comes into film session.
In his flowery shirts. And
yeah, the flowery shirts are only, boat wear, so to be fair. How do they, it's interesting, like I think a little skeptical in the beginning. I think also like a little bit like, oh, this is kind of cool. This guy's, kind of well known in some ways about like in some field. But I don't know, it's interesting. Like I think the culture is so deferential in some ways that the fact that you're like the president of the team means a lot. So even if you were someone that they didn't respect, they would still respect you because you're the president. Like they, some players will call me Prezi or El Presidente or like Jefe. So they're all like really good people. Like they all really, I don't pretend to know like all of their intimate details, like familial like backgrounds and their interpersonal relationships with their upper members. But like I can see what I see in terms of how they conduct themselves, and I'm very proud to have every player who's on our team. So, but there are some funny things too. Like I thought, like wow, like there was like I was like going around. We have like a promotion bonus when we get promoted, yeah. So like I went to a bunch of games, and for a while, every game I went to, we won. So every time I would be around them, I would hear prima, 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 and I wasn't like so sophisticated. I'm still learning Spanish, so I thought like they were saying like I was number one. Like they would say prima at me, and I was like I'm number one, I'm prime, I'm whatever. It's got to be good, right? And then I was like, let me look this up, and it just meant bonus. That's it. That's all it meant was bonus. So maybe I'm just like the guy who cuts a check for them, and that's cool too because that's good. It's good enough. But yeah.
Well, in general in football, what do the leagues do to try and keep sort of the spirit of competition alive? Keep things fair, because I could imagine. The game could easily devolve into just basically which teams have the most money to throw at buying the best players.
Yeah, that was the one thing that was attractive about Spain, in some ways, was that there is a real financial guardrail system in place where you can't spend more than you make. So in third division, our division, you can spend whatever the fuck you want because you're not part of La Liga yet. So it's like kind of a competitive advantage to be willing to spend. But I'm trying to buy expensive players or sign expensive players. They just don't want to come to the third division. Like I would pay a lot for some of these players. They just don't want to come because it's worth it to me to avoid the massive, if I think they can meaningfully impact our chances of getting promoted. La Liga has very strict rules where they determine what your revenue is. They tell you what your revenue is, and you're allowed to spend X amount of that on players, coaches, and front office people.
When I think back of, I used to follow football quite a lot, and I remember this odd time when just like video as evidence was starting to become a thing that was possible and was already used in many other sports. Football was quite against, and very many people and reporters would write about how no, we want the randomness of the referee, basically.
Oh, you mean like these close moments where it's like, oh, was that offside or not?
Yeah, or like did the ball go in or not, and like you can just look at the camera and find out, or you go with whatever the referee decided.
Yeah.
And people just thought it was against the spirit of the game to have camera evidence be used.
Yeah.
Which now seems obviously insane, but like I suppose maybe they wanted the randomness, didn't want it to be touched. But anyway, what I wonder from there is like, it seems like they were even further behind of the kind of quantitative, data-driven approach than other sports. And then you come in there with just like a fully quantitative approach to a team with a lot of history.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's different. I mean, I think the one thing that's to our advantage a little bit is I have a history of like doing well at this predict whatever. And then there's other people that are much better at that. They've done it already in football. Like, the most successful football teams in the world relative to what they're spending and what they can spend on players and where they are, what their results are, one of them is run by like the most successful soccer bettor in the world, or the former soccer hero in the world. And so like people can be like, okay, maybe he's not as good as that guy, but if I'm like, 2D Tony Bloom, that's not like a bad thing. Like two-dimensional Tony Bloom's not bad for the third division of Spain, or like, of Brighton. And then there's the owner of Brentford also uses like a data heavy approach from former gambling. And so while I've never was like a super successful football bettor, we do have the ability to make models based on data that's available. And I think we can use that approach.
Are you using any kind of, or you're developing AI systems?
I don't know. AI to me is like, don't know, machine learning. I mean, regression analysis is machine learning, and that's essentially like a large language model, but using the language of mathematics versus iteration. So like you're when you're doing a regression analysis, you're kind of doing AI. And so, but like, I don't know. I don't know what AI means for when people think about AI. Like I'm certainly not going to like upload all my videos to ChatGPT and ask it to tell me what we were doing wrong. That's for sure.
Have you seen this video of a boxing match being tracked by AI vision?
Yeah, I've seen
where
that.
they were,
there already is that for football.
Oh, okay.
There's skill corner.
That seems like it would just give you more items and like more fine-grained information
Sure.
if you wanted it.
There's a couple different problems. There isn't a large enough repository of video. Like all these AI things, like they're large language models. In other words, you need a ton of fucking inputs to make things happen. And there just isn't enough recorded football that you could plug in or bits of data.
I mean, surely, there's so many recorded games.
There is, but it's like the processing power to process recorded video versus words is completely different.
Yeah.
It's like, you're analyzing every second of every football match that you want to upload. And then you've got to like do that over and over. And then also like at what cost? Like you could also do that, or you could like take financial data and try to like build a model that could beat the stock market. Like, oh, I'm probably gonna do the stock market. Like, I'll probably go geared towards finance. And so I think like it's there, but it's not quite there in terms of like, it's just not applicable.
Let's say though, in the hypothetical, it is possible to develop some kind of system that could create such accurate predictions.
That's what the Brighton model is. I mean, Brighton, I don't know personally, like intimately how they operate, but I feel like I have an idea. They charted data really early on. They were the first ones to hire like remote, like, basically remote workers in a different country to watch games and record data. And so these two groups, they did that. In fact, the owners of Brighton and Brentford used to be not partners, but the Brentford guy used to work for the Brighton guy.
Mm.
And so, but they charted their own data. So they had a massive advantage where they were the only ones with the level of data that they knew was required. And they built their models based on that. And they were able to predict outcomes, which then allows them to also predict which players are going to be valuable. And they make a lot of money on player trading. They both play the game very differently also, which is interesting. Like the way their coaches approach the game is very differently.
Let's say we get to artificial general intelligence, whereby, almost anything a human can do, an AI can do.
Yeah.
It feels like sports is one of the few sectors of human life that may be untouched, left relatively unmolested by it, right?
Yeah, it's like the last vestige of like humanity in some ways is like these types of competitions where humans can actually still. Now in the background, the machines could be informing people on what decisions they should be making strategically that the human should be making or the coach should be making. But at the end of the day, it's still a game. Like even, we look at like, there's certain things like certain things in football are like plus EV or negative EV, like a high cross, from far outside the pitch across the center of the penalty area is pretty low EV versus like a low on the ground cross. But like if you're a player and you're barreling down, like you have to practice in such a way that you can understand. Like we had a player who was crossing the ball way too much, and we were just like, hey, this isn't a plus EV play. Like sometimes you're crossing the ball and there's no players in the box. Like, what's the point of that? But he has taught at some point that I'm a right back and I have to learn how to cross the ball. Yeah, and so like we tried to show him some stuff, and he was like, "Yeah, but I'm playing, and it's a game. And you have to respect that they're playing and it's a game, and they're not robots. But you can still improve, and you can still get better, and you can still make better decisions. And so we're trying to identify what is and isn't the proper strategy, and reinforce that through practice. I think that's the coach. So I spent quite a bit of time with the coach. I think that's his approach, and he has like full reign to run his practices and do his thing in any manner which he sees fits. And I think they do such a good job of like making the practices geared towards making good decisions in games because you're iterating it over and over and over again. And so the machines, they're going to leave probably sports alone, and that's kind of nice.
What about sports betting?
Yeah, sports betting's dust. Like it's just that there's ways where you can still make, but like in terms of like the scale that I would want to support my like where I'm going to spend my time and get the most utility, it's just certainly AI can beat sports betting.
The same way that like I expect online poker, high stakes online poker is already basically dead, right?
Yeah, the machines are just better.
And whoever has the capital to
By the way, the
build
owners,
and
the
deploy those
owners could
machines.
be run out by machines too. Like the machines could be making better decisions than the owners for sure. But we try to use the machines and like at least have like some control over
Do you think that will happen?
I don't know how that would happen. How does a machine buy a football team? If we can figure that out.
I know. I just have to presume that anything that AI can be used for that has an economic incentive, it will be used for.
Perhaps. I'm just like the type of guy though, where it's like, I mean, I plan, but I don't worry. Does that make sense? So like,
Sure.
if it happens, it happens. I'll figure something out. I don't know. Like, okay, great. Like, I'm not, to me, the worrying is the part that's unnecessary. So like, I'm not in control. I'm not going to be someone who's going to, like, we've had these conversations about other things and they're like, well, you could certainly make an impact on this or you can, but I was like, maybe I could, maybe I couldn't. I just want to live my life and enjoy my life and spend time with people I care about. So if AI ruins something, then it ruins something. And I don't want to spend the next 10 years worrying about what's going to happen inevitably. I want to enjoy the time I have left. And I think that, it's in as many ways as it can make the world worse in a lot of ways, I think it can make the world better in a lot of ways too. And
Definitely.
and I think it's just something that, I'm a big believer, like I'm not like super into Buddhism, but I'm like, I think a lot of the tenets of Buddhist philosophy kind of like resonate with me. And so I just think like, worry about what you can control. If something's out of your control, stoicism's like that as well. Anything out of my control, I tend to not really focus on. I look at my dog, and this is not to be funny, but like he's got a great life. Is he worried about exactly what's happening next? Like, probably not. Look at him. He's sleeping now. He's having a great time. He knows he's going to get his meal at 4 o'clock and at 9 o'clock in the morning. And maybe I'm going to leave and he's going to come with me. Maybe not. And it's just like, he's literally has a great life. So I'm not saying I want to be a doodle in the future with AI as my overlord, but I don't really care. Like, this is going to sound awful, but like, I mean, humanity, like, that's not in my wheelhouse. Like, you guys you're smarter than me. You can worry about humanity. I'm going to worry about me and mine. Like, it's really, honestly, I just want to worry about myself having a good life, treating the people around me with kindness if I can. And like, it's scary for sure, but it's scarier the more you obsess over it. That's my philosophy. Like the stuff that you guys worry about, I worry about like a bunch of other different things than AI.
Like what?
I worry about like just the idea that humans are losing like autonomy from different like I just worry like the ability to actually like earn a living and get up from under. Like if I was in my 20s or 30s, I would be more terrified about whether I was going to live like an actual chicken, but as a human being. In other words, not being able to own a home, being forced to live in like these rented places, having like some sort of like central bank digital currency controlling my every movement, having some totalitarian regime take over. I think I would be more worried about that. And maybe the AI help is what's going to make it easier to control the humans. And that's something that, but
Definitely one path.
yeah, that's something that I would worry about more than just like the AI is taking over. Like, I think the humans are scarier than the machines.
Do you have any ideas of solutions?
No, not really. I mean, I don't mean to like, it's just kind of like, I feel like I think about young people a lot and I just think like, I look at them and I'm like, okay, what is like, they've been given these devices to and endless entertainment as though a drug, like, so it's two things have happened. The ones who want the actual drug are getting the drug, the fentanyl, the cheap drugs, the whatever. And the ones that want the entertainment drug are getting that and they want the dopamine hit, they're getting social media. And it's just kind of like made them blind to what's like, could you imagine if when we were growing up, if someone said the world is just going to shut down, everyone's going to have to stay in their homes for a while, like that would have been like a completely fantastical, but everyone just accepted it. And the way our information is presented and the way everything is kind of, the way we access information and how it's like highly curated and your feed is curated, your social media feed is like, you no longer see the posts from your friends in the order they send them. It's like, oh, and plus you might also want to see this. You may forget about, Igor, but what about this guy? You want to see this guy? This guy might be more interesting. And it's just, there's a lot of that. And I think that to me is, but that again, that's fueled by AI. So it's the same thing, but I would have more worries about that and more empathy for young people there than anything else, because I feel like that's an inevitability. The AI thing is kind of fantastic. And I think, by the way, the AI thing could be like kind of a thing that's kind of a distraction, like a magician's distraction to what's really happening too. Like, oh, let's worry about the stuff out of our control while we protect you from the AI. Now we're going to put you in these situations to protect you from the AI. And so it's an odd time to be alive.
What advice would you give to your younger self, aged 20, if you could now?
I think that I certainly sacrificed personal relationships and growth for money and for like success, primarily like financial. Because I played a game where you kept score with how much money you made. That's like my job, was how much money you made. And I wanted to like solve for that all the time. So I would probably go back and be like, yeah, like at some point enough's enough. Like you're good. You know, spend a little bit more time. I think I was more of I think for me, work represented an escape. Like I never drank, I never did alcohol, I never did drugs. I never had any like bad habits but I was a workaholic. And I think that's very common amongst a lot of people who hadn't identified why they were a workaholic, but they were. And so a lot of people that had like some sort of stuff they hadn't worked through yet as from their youth will either get into drugs or get into whatever, and the other people will work. And so I think the thing I would probably tell myself would be just to like try to figure out exactly what it is you want out of life, like really what you want, not like what you think you want and what you think will help you avoid dealing with like some level of pain that might come later or something like that.
Is there a method to figuring that out when you don't have the wisdom that you have, you know, in your mid-40s?
Yeah, you can read books from great people who like I mean, it's kind of like cliche to talk about Marcus Aurelius Meditations, but like you can read that book. Here's a guy who was like been through it all and knew he was going to die at an early age, died at an early age. And you get this like beautiful treasure of him writing his thoughts, not for other people, but just for himself. He didn't intend it to be consumed, but yet it's out there for everybody to read. And I think, yeah, had I discovered that when I was younger, I think it would have had a big impact on me, because a lot of it is just like, it's just probably like it's the best advice you can get, I think, especially as a man. I don't know what it's like as a woman, but as like a man, like what I think of as a man, what it means to be a man, which is like to care for people or to be someone who is like operates in high integrity, does the right thing. Reading something like that, I think as a young person can't do anything but help you, for sure.
So there we go, folks. Thank you for listening. And of course, huge thanks to Bob for such a fun conversation and for being such an open book on so many of his like strategies and fun stories. Do check out the show notes below. Some links to, of course, CD Castellon, as well as some sort of betting, strategy stuff, lingo, that sort of thing. Do also give him a follow on Twitter. And also, apologies for the quality of Igor's mic. It seems like we forgot to plug it in. Podcasting is hard, that's all I will say. But yes, thank you so much, and I will see you next time. Until then, keep on winning.